I specialize in what we like to call sustainable business and impact investing. And it's kind of a niche practice. And I'm really happy to be doing it because it's pretty fun. It means all of my clients are mission-driven and interested in trying to change the world and make a little money at the same time. So a little bit more about that later, but I kind of wanted to start by getting a temperature of the room because we're going to be learning some new legal concepts tonight. And I wanted to see, kind of gauge where you guys are in terms of what you know and what you don't know. So just to get a sense, how many of you are familiar with the benefit corporation as a legal form? Okay, a few of you. Hand up is the benefit corporation as a legal form. So I'm glad, Rose, you raised your hand.
I know about it.
Yeah. And how many of you are familiar with B Corp certification? Okay, great. Okay, so you've got some familiarity. That's good. And then how many of you work for a startup? Okay. How many of you would consider yourself more on the investor side of things? Okay, we won't go too deep into that side then. So I'll start by giving you kind of a picture. Oops, this way. The movement for good, the broad picture. Got enterprises, right? And there's all kinds of things going on in this space right now. And I would say when you're talking about the movement for good, it includes all of these things, not just nonprofits, not just benefit corporations. General purpose corporations are also very involved in this space. And then sorry, I did a lot of work. Anyway, then the investor side, we've got all kinds of players on that side of things. And you know, I was thinking about trying to draw some arrows, you know, like these people invest in these things and these people invest in these things. But, you know, it was like, actually, it's all everyone investing in everything at this point. So I'm not going to limit it by drawing some arrows. Just know that these are the players on that side, and these are some of the things that are happening on the enterprise side. And then, of course, what types of investments are happening. Debt, equity, grants, social impact bonds. I mean, everything is just exploding. And if you want statistics on the impact space, mission-driven organizations, I mean, there's a ton of them out there. Some of them are believable, some of them are less believable, but I think everyone agrees that this is where the future is going for the time being. And we've got big players in the space like JP Morgan. We've got small players in the space like some of you or the people that are out there in the Bay Area trying to make change. So things are happening across all asset classes, which is really exciting too. It used to be just really on the private side and only with individuals that are focused on it. And now, like I said, you know, all of the big players are making an offering on the public side as well, focusing on ESG, and that kind of thing. So there's all kinds of pieces that fit in here, but suffice to say that the universe is pretty big. So I'm going to focus tonight on just talking about hybrid structures. So when I say hybrid structure, that's differentiated from what I would call a tandem structure, in which you have a for-profit and a nonprofit working together in concert to solve a problem or run a business. And most of you are probably familiar with that because all the tech companies have that right now. And they've got a .org and they've got their for-profit business. Some companies, the relationship is even tighter, where the nonprofit owns all of the assets of the business, the IP, and licenses it to the for-profit, and there's all kinds of things that you can do. We're not going to talk about that. We're just going to talk about hybrid structures, which are exciting because they're more new, right? So the tandem structure, where overall people have been doing that for a while, but this new idea of a kind of business that's focused on doing good and doing well is new. So the benefit corporation is where we'll start, because I love the law. So here we go. So just to give you guys a brief overview, and I don't know how much you know about all the details of this, so if I go too fast, feel free to raise your hand and ask a question. I want this to be a conversation. So there's three main distinguishing factors for a benefit corporation. And the first one is about your purpose. So you actually decide to have a purpose for your business, and you come up with a statement that describes your business in a pithy one-sentence phrase, and you put that purpose in your charter that gets filed with the state, if you're filing it in Delaware, for example. So, you know, it can be very simple to alleviate homelessness across the United States. It can be very complicated. It's really up to you. But the purpose really matters because it comes into play for the corporation and kind of drives some other things. So when I typically work with clients on this, we spend some time on it because it's really about, you know, what you're going to be focused on for the business of the company. And if for those of you who come from the nonprofit world, this is very similar to what we would see if you were forming a nonprofit and had to identify a charitable purpose. So that's kind of the genesis for the idea, is that company that is trying to do good has to identify that good thing that they need to be doing. So then, next one is transparency. Second prong of any good benefit corporation. So the board is going to be taking this specific benefit into account when making decisions. And the legislation says that anytime the board is making a decision and they opt to put the purpose of the corporation above, for example, financial value, that's okay. The board is allowed to kind of take everything into account when making its decision and, you know, make the best decision that they think needs to be made for the company, regardless of whether it means more money to the shareholders or not, right? So we typically refer to this as a broad stakeholder model. And a lot of the press about this type of form talks about this idea. And I would say that actually we still need to talk about this more, because there's, especially on Wall Street, there's a perception that value for a business is just about how much profit you're taking home at the end of the day, you know, salaries paid out to the executives, and then, you know, whatever's left, you're paying out to the shareholders. And, you know, the idea behind this kind of business is that you want to be able to put your money where it needs, put the company's budget where it needs to go to really drive the purpose of the business that you've identified. So, you know, easy example that I like to use, right? The company's business, they figured out a way how to, you know, save forests, right? And make money at it somehow. They've got a good business model going. And, you know, the decision on the table is, you know, are we going to select this vendor that is also in line with our values, and they're very green and they don't use very much, you know, paper or other paper products in their business? Or are we going with this vendor that's less conscious, but cheaper, right? And, you know, that's a very simple example. Probably the board wouldn't think about it that much, right? But the idea is that they could select the vendor that's going to cost them more because it's in line with their values. And then the final prong is accountability. So, and this varies from state to state, what the report needs to look like and how often you need to do it. But the basic idea is that you've got your purpose, the board's making decisions to protect that purpose all along the way, and then every year, every other year, the board is going to assess how well the company's doing against that purpose. And the board can make an assessment using an outside third-party assessment that they found somewhere that's relevant to their industry, you know, fair trade or something like that, or they can identify their own type of assessment and create it basically from scratch. And the idea is that you're putting that assessment or report up on your website for the public to see, so that you can show and demonstrate that you know, you're trying to make progress, whatever that means to you, against the purpose that you've identified. So those are kind of like the main tenets of any benefit corporation statute. And I've generalized here because it's available in 28 states plus DC. And California's statute is quite different from Delaware's, for example. So, you know, there's state-specific issues there. You have a question?
Are you taking questions now, or would you prefer it until the end?
I can do a question now. Sure.
Okay. I was just wondering, so you kind of answered it, there's 28 states.
Yeah.
Is Delaware also the most popular for benefit corp as it is for like private corp? And why is that if it is?
Sure. Yeah, it is. And the reason why it's most popular for the PBC is that the same reason why it's popular for general purpose corporation. It's just the overall body of law in Delaware is much larger. So every possible decision that the board would want to make, there's usually a precedent in case law that's thought about that issue, and the board has pretty clear guidance about how it should behave or what the rules are to kind of govern its behavior. So people like certainty. And especially as you move towards going public, they really like certainty, right? So, you know, IPOs don't have the same cachet, I think, that they used to maybe even 15 years ago. But, you know, so some people could say, well, why be a Delaware corp if you're never going to go, you know, never going to go public? But it's still, you know, investors like it, you know, that kind of idea is that Delaware is just kind of the gold standard. So the benefit corporation statute is actually, you know, very small portion of the overall general corporate statute, and the general corporation statute is applicable to benefit corporations. So there's still the same certainty there.
So,
yeah.
What are the big differences between California statute and Delaware?
Mm-hmm. So the Delaware statute primarily is what I would call benefit corporation light. The statute in California is very close to what the working group, the nationwide working group would call the Uniform Code. So it's very robust. It's got the most requirements out of the reporting, right? And in California, you have to report every year. In Delaware, you can decide whether you're going to report every year, every other year, for example. And there's like a lot of guidance in the statute. It's just, you know, in terms of what your benefit purpose can be and all of that kind of thing. Delaware, you know, got strong-armed into passing the legislation in 2013, which was awesome and very, actually, for the movement, quite unexpected. In my opinion, I thought it was going to take a lot longer. But the lobbying effort was quite strong, and so in order to pass the legislation in Delaware, they stripped it down quite a bit, and so it's pretty light. And you can opt in to a lot of things and do a lot of things voluntarily, which we usually recommend to our clients when we build out their bylaws and that kind of thing. But the requirements are actually pretty light.
I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but
yeah.
So Delaware is preferred because there's a lot of you know, precedents. There's a lot of laws that have been decided, but California has more of the uniform code for benefits corporations. So why would you prefer Delaware? Because it's maybe easier legally, but then you probably want to refer to California.
Yeah, like you could opt in, kind of, and that's what we've been recommending to clients that want to go that direction. But you know, the issue is a lot of startups have a lot of pressure from their investors to be as uniform and vanilla as possible. So that's kind of driving the Delaware adoption. So, and I typically, you know, am on board with that. You know, like, let's not overly complicated things because everyone wants Delaware. Let's just do Delaware. You know, so okay. So I already covered this. state statute, 28 states and counting. It's happening all over the country. It's super exciting. It's, you know, kind of on the docket for 3 or 4 more states right now. So, I mean, things are moving fairly quickly through the country. In California, it was in 2012. The legislation was passed in 2011 and became effective January 1st, 2012. And in Delaware, it was August 1st, 2013. And like I said, we were a little surprised about how quickly that went, but it's a great thing. So common misperception here is that a benefit corporation is somehow equivalent to a nonprofit and that you get some kind of preferential tax status. That's not the case. It's a for-profit business, so there is no effect on your tax status. You can't file a tax-exempt application with the IRS if you're a benefit corporation. So you're still making the same decision for Benefit Corp as to whether to be a C or an S Corp. But there is, if you're here in the city, it's pretty good. You get the contracting preference. So you're basically given the same bump as if you were a maybe-weeby. So you get slight contracting preference when you're making a bid to the city and county. So it's a good thing. It's not like huge, but the city's doing its best too. So any other questions about this? And I just wanted to show you some examples, believe it or not. So Patagonia, I was telling Rose earlier, they were very huge proponents and actually had been part of the lobbying group in California to support the legislation. So they went out of their way. They became the first California benefit corporation. They made the filing first. Since it's become available, all of these other companies have opted in as well. So, you know, a lot of them, and we'll start talking about B Corp certification, but a lot of them actually started as founding members of the certified group, and when it became available, also opted in to the PBC. So it's pretty exciting, and you know, it's happening slowly, but it's happening. Any other questions about benefit corps before I move on to BD certification? And then we can I have some other, we can revisit. Yeah.
Are you going to talk about like exits for companies that are certified or not certified, but legally benefit corporations?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So one of the main reasons why people started pushing this legislation or being proponents of this legislation is around this ability to make decisions as a board that protect the broad stakeholder model. And so specifically, the idea is that when you exit, you are passing on a company that has this built in to your corporation. And in California, it takes a 2/3 vote to opt back out of this. A 2/3 vote of the shareholders, which could be quite a big group at the time of an exit, right? So the idea is that you're kind of baking in your purpose from the start, and you want everyone who's involved from that point forward to be on board with that purpose, right? So you're acquiring shareholders from the very beginning who know what your purpose is and are okay with the fact that the dollars they get back will first have been applied to the broad purpose of the company before getting sent to them. And it's not to say you're going to make less money as a shareholder of a benefit corporation, because I am a firm believer that they can go toe-to-toe, but it's possible, and everyone needs to be okay with that. So there's some investor alignment there, and then also the exit strategy. So, for example, Plum Organics was acquired by Campbell Foods, and they're a wholly owned subsidiary of Campbell, and they continue to be a benefit corporation. Campbell did not mess with that when they got acquired. And, you know, the kind of preeminent case that everyone talks about is Ben & Jerry's. They were not a benefit corporation yet because they didn't have this available to them, but when they were acquired by Unilever, they also had another bid that was less money from dryers. and they thought that dryers would actually be a better custodian of their overall mission and purpose and culture, but they were afraid to take the offer because dryers' offer was a less price per share. And so there's some reasonable legal disagreement about whether or not they still could have taken the dryer's offer. So if you start getting into a cocktail conversation with a lawyer about this, I would say tread carefully. But the general idea is that, you know, whether it's not black letter law, but, you know, everyone was afraid that if they didn't take that higher price, that they would end up with a shareholder suit. So that situation is cited fairly frequently.
I have another question. So
Sure.
on the flip side of that, are there any incremental costs with becoming a benefit corporation that you foresee except for like admin and reporting? Okay.
Yep. I mean, the board has to be fairly well informed about what you're doing and the corporate structure that you've selected, because there is an additional onus on them to be in charge of the assessment and doing that regularly. But I don't,
You haven't seen anything.
yeah.
Have there been any significant stakeholder lawsuits?
Not yet. So that's one piece that I didn't mention. It's a myth, actually. So it gets repeated in the press quite a bit. So there is an ability to sue the company to protect the purpose, right? So, and the press loves to talk about this. But the only thing that you can ask for when you make that suit as a shareholder is to force the company to pursue their purpose. There's no monetary damages for that. So that's the part that the press likes to leave out. So if you were like especially, you know, concerned about what the company was doing and you were a shareholder, you could go to a court and make a judge tell the company to start doing its purpose. And there's, again, like a lot of legal debate about whether or not that should have some monetary damages attached to it or it shouldn't. Eventually everyone kind of landed on the idea that we were never going to get the legislation adopted if we did included a monetary damages clause in the lawsuit. But, you know, ideally, I think that would be something that you would want to consider because otherwise it's kind of just like a slap on the wrist. And then to answer your real question about, you know, are people suing about this issue about stakeholders and value and where the money's going and that kind of thing? Not yet. And that's going to be the true test, which is great because we've got Delaware right now, so hopefully it will be in Delaware and whatever they decide will be controversial, I'm sure, but we'll have something definitive out of Delaware, and I think, you know, at least it'll increase the certainty about what's going to happen. So, hopefully. Lots of questions now.
Corporations that are still operating in tandem and have foundation offshoots or whatnot, and the growing pressure certainly to have very illustrative like CSR programs.
Mm-hmm.
If you see eventually like social pressure forcing them more toward a benefit corporation like a hybrid structure, and kind of like the marriage of church and state versus just being separate bodies or something.
Yeah, I mean that's a huge issue in the movement as a whole. And I don't think I could really make a call about what's going to happen. I mean, there's still a pretty traditional divide, between people who think that, you know, you just build a company and you know, make it the best that you can and, you know, pull all the value out of it that you can, and then you know, take your millions of dollars and then go donate it, right? And that's a very traditional way of looking at improving the community overall. And increasingly, even on the foundation side, and sometimes the foundations have been first movers, depending, have seen the opportunity to, you know, do program-related investments and make loans to for-profits, for example, to improve their capacity and that kind of thing. And it's happening, right? But it's not happening, you know, across the board, across generations. I mean, some of this is generational. Right, so everyone talks about the millennials and what they're doing to the whole country and how we think about things. And I think as you get more people who are interested in having like an integrated way of looking at their community, you're going to see greater adoption of this model. But while the people in power are still kind of used to the old model, there's not going to be as much of a shift. And, this is kind of tied up in legal structure, which, I can't sadly speak very favorably of my profession in terms of, being interested in change. So I think, there's a lot of attorneys out there who would caution against doing something new. So you've got still that kind of separation.
So don't hold our breath about Walmart converting in the next quarter.
No, yeah. I mean, and Walmart actually is, not my favorite company for a variety of reasons, but I do have to say, they are doing things, right? And ideally, you would get companies like that to kind of bite the bullet and say, okay, we're going to commit to this purpose and we're going to align everything around that. But more time is needed. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Sure. So following on his question, have there have been suits in the other direction, right? That have been awarded by a benefit corporation status, for example. So a shareholder suing because the company didn't choose profits over benefit. There was one. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. If there is one, I'd be happy to know about it. Yeah. I'm following it closely. Okay.
I just wanted to share.
Oh, sure. Sorry. Yeah.
Kind of following up to that in this topic of the lawsuit aspect, I have a prediction that the first suit will be from the founder.
Right.
It'll be the founder. It'll be the founder suing their own company or the company that they started.
Right. Yeah. As we get
We'll see.
farther and farther away from the founder, yeah, things happen. Okay. Whoops. Is that my first speaker? Yes. Okay. So moving on to B corporations. To just kind of separate out B corporations or B certified, as Rose suggested we start calling it, because I think it's a little easier, is strictly that, a certification. Has nothing to do with your legal structure, at least at first. We'll get into that a little bit more. But the idea is that this separate third party called B Labs, which is a nonprofit, puts out this thing called an assessment, B Corp assessment, and you fill it out. And you have to get a score of 80 out of 200 in order to pass. And if you're a startup and kind of interested in dipping your toe in the water, you can fill out the assessment and pay your fee and be pending be certified for up to 12 months. And it doesn't require that you have to have the score of 80 out of 200. And why is that? Because it's kind of actually hard for a startup to get 80 out of 200 even on this test, because a lot of it is asking about what you're doing with your employees or your office space. Sometimes startups don't have employees or office space yet, so it gets really kind of tricky. So they've got this pending thing for startups. They've got, and then you put it on your website that you're B Corp certified, and you also you have to recertify every other year. So there's an annual fee every year, which is a minimum of $500. And that's based on your annual sales. So up to $1 million in annual sales, it's $500 a year, and then it slides up after that. If you have a company that's $1 billion in annual sales, they say, see, email here. That's very optimistic, guys. Yeah. So yeah, the issue here is that actually B certification and benefit corporations are related. And sometimes, in some circles, it's a little known fact. So you guys are going to be smarter than the average bear. The idea is that if you are just an LLC or an LLP, for example, you can continue on with that structure and be certified into eternity, and everything's great. However, if you are a corporation, they are now saying that you have to convert to a benefit corporation within a certain amount of time in order to maintain your B certification status. The biggest example of this, of course, is Etsy. So as you may recall, Etsy went public in April, and they are B certified, but they're not a benefit corporation. They have until August 2017 to decide whether or not they want to convert to a benefit corporation, or they lose their B certification under the current rules. So actually took a look at their prospectus, and they're very bullish on all the awesome things that B certification is about. Broad stakeholder model, environmental protection, sustainability, employees, everything that you would expect a B Corp to embrace. And so it's going to be interesting. I'm not really sure how they'll spin it if they give up their certification. Yeah.
Can you be a B certified L3C?
Yes. You can be any entity type that you want. Yeah.
What's the difference between the B certification and benefit corporation?
So the B certification is a certification only, and the certification comes from a third-party group called B Lab. And the benefit corporation is a legal structure. Yeah.
So what is it be certified? What is that? What is the purpose? Is that just to tell the world we have this purpose, or is it sort of something clear I don't know.
Yeah, so the one big difference is that for the B certification, you actually don't have to have a purpose that's a benefit to something. Excuse me, it can just be we're running our business and we make widgets and we make money, right? So the idea is that all your other practices, that how you run your business satisfies this assessment, right? So the assessment is the same for every company that certifies, and your score is displayed on the B Corp website, right? So it's kind of it's massive transparency about your business practices, and there's certain things that you're allowed to keep secret if you want. You can opt into that and all kinds of things, but I mean, by and large, it's basically like we do these things, we don't do these things, and this is our score. So one cool thing about the B Corp certification is it's available worldwide, right? So the UK is fairly involved in this movement. There's Australia is actually really jumping on board as well, but there's not vast adoption all over the world about this idea. So to be really part of this worldwide movement, you can get the B Corporation certification, and you're opting into this community and this globally recognized certification. Like I said, it's any business structure, and there's a fee. And when you're initially assessed, it's fairly involved. They send someone out, you fill out the assessment, and then they actually visit you physically. And then when you're actually kind of put into this random pool, you could be visited again in between your recertification period for an on-site visit as well. So they're really trying to drive kind of the transparency and enforcement aspect. And the benefit corporation, by contrast, doesn't have, there's no person from the state of California or the state of Delaware, checking and making sure that these corporations are fulfilling their purpose. So,
Question.
Sure.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
So B Lab, you said was the certified organization, and that's a third party, that's a private organization themselves?
It's a nonprofit, yeah.
It's a nonprofit, okay. Are they baked into the structure by name, or could there potentially be some competition of an alternative certifying organization?
Yeah, some other organization could start their own certification. They'd have to call it something else, right? So they just B Lab has basically created this creature, and it was originally started in 2007. So yes, someone could introduce a competing one.
And those competing ones satisfy the requirement that some states have for third-party certification.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, so there's other options. I mean, there's other kind of independent nonprofits that are out there looking at this kind of thing, and you can use that type of assessment. If you're the board of a benefit corporation, you can use that type of assessment to look at whether or not you're achieving your purpose or not.
I'm a little confused why. So you don't have to have like, a mission or whatever for the certification, and it's pretty much what I've gathered solely from like transparency.
Mm-hmm.
So if I were a company, like why would I want to pay $500 every other year to say that like why couldn't I just be a transparent company?
Right. Thanks for the setup. Yeah, so, and a lot of these, these three reasons apply to Benefit Corp and B Corp certification in their own way. So I wouldn't say that they necessarily just apply to B certification, but, like the gentleman over here pointed out, I mean, they've just been doing it longer, right? And it's very visible, right? So,
Wait, you're saying these?
the certification, the certification is very visible, and even though the certification is now driving adoption of the benefit corporation, the certification is, I totally blanked. I didn't include like the little B certified logo anywhere in my slides.
Are these benefit corporations that are B certified? Or are these B certified only?
These are B certified. Let's see. I mostly kept these out of it, but let's see. Oops.
I'm just like drawing Venn diagrams in my head.
Yeah, out of these guys, I think, all of them except for Hand Up are B certified. And these guys started as B certified because it was available. They were part of the original group in 2007. And then, or maybe, they were part of the original group in 2007. And then when the benefit corporation legislation became available, they also opted in, which I was actually excited about because I knew Method, Plum, I knew all of these except for Patagonia, I knew as B certified companies. And then I was like getting ready for this presentation. I was like, oh, these guys actually opted in. So even I didn't, necessarily know, because it's kind of like this corporate form and like who really cares about your corporate structure, and only these like small group of us really care, But so they're not like publicizing it the same way that the certification is getting publicized, right? So you're out in the store, and I mean the main thing about the B certification is these are consumer products, right? And I'm seeing a lot more adoption of B certification in the consumer space because people are starting to recognize the logo, right? And I'm like, necessarily like EO, for example. It's like, oh, you see it on the label, I'll buy that, that kind of thing. Lotion in the store, 7th Generation, Method, all of those guys. So the idea is that, you're driving people to look for that label the same way you might look for organics, right?
So would you say that it's primarily used as a marketing or brand awareness tool?
Yeah, so I would say that of these three options, the B Corp certification is more about your customers and also to a certain extent your community, and being able to kind of have a cohort of companies in your local area that are also B Corp certified, and you can like hang out with them and stuff, right? The capital piece, I think, is much more driven on the benefit corporation side, where people are actually trying to differentiate themselves from other startups or other people in their industry and say to investors, hey, align with me. And to some investors, it's very attractive, and they already know about this. And to other investors, even when they're learning about it for the first time, they can get pretty excited. So just to use that. Oh. So, you know, the idea here on the capital side is the stuff that we've talked about, right? That you're protecting your mission, that in case of an exit, your company's mission is you're gonna try to make sure that it lives on. You know, in the case of Plum Organics, they're wholly owned subsidiary, so Campbell, as the sole shareholder, could have decided to opt them back out of it, but they didn't, which is cool. So it's not a total protection, but ideally that's, you know, the direction the company's gonna go. Customers, I think this is mostly around, like I said, the consumer brands, but who knows where it'll go as it continues to get more adopted. And then the movement piece is actually really huge too. So I don't know if any of you know about the SOCAP conference that's at Fort Mason every year. And it's a great example of the community and how it's growing. So I can't emphasize enough that this is actually like a movement, and there's people that are starting to focus on this entirely all day, every day, which is really exciting. And it's only growing. And I've been going to SOCAP for a ton of years, and it used to be like kind of small and no one knew about it. And it was just kind of this hokey thing where people got together to talk about social capital markets. And now it's like gigantic. So, and it's several days, and there's parties and accelerators and people, and I mean, it's really great. And it's happening all over the country, it's happening all over the world. Like I said, the UK, there's tons of stuff happening there. So, you know, I think in terms of having a community of people that are trying to accomplish the same thing, it's really starting to happen. The Bay Area is a hot spot for it. So. Any other questions? Yeah.
I know on like B Labs, you can see the list of like B certified companies. Is there a place to look state by state for B corporations?
No. No. I really wish there was.
Yeah, you gotta make it.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we're starting to get the information from the Secretary of State, but like I had the list from Delaware and California like as of June 30 or something, but yeah.
Elon is the one who helped pass the benefit corporation legislation. Why don't they promote benefit corporations?
Good question. And I would say, like, the times that I interact with B-Lab, it's kind of a mixed bag. Like, sometimes the people at the higher levels of the organization understand what's going on and are very pro-benefit corporation. I think the people that might be a little bit less close to the center of things tend to feel like there's a competition going on, even though there really can't be, because they're feeding each other. And the certification is directly forcing the conversions. So, yeah. Oh, but another good point is that they have, so, you know, I have a lot of, there's a lot of legal scholars and also attorneys in the Bay Area and other places that don't know about this stuff. So I've heard of specific instances where people get dissuaded from doing this, either the certification or the benefit corporation. Attorneys who think it's a waste of time, or just a bunch of like another version of a nonprofit, or what have you. So there's a lot of disinformation out there. People just aren't educated, and like I said about the shareholder lawsuit risk and things like that, people hear about these things and they don't quite understand them. So what's happening now is that B-Lab has hired a legal team kind of headed up by the premier legal scholar in Delaware, who they're doing a roadshow right now at law firms across the country to try to educate at least the lawyers about the benefit corporation structure and get more people on board. So it's happening slowly. Yeah.
You see any movement of grants going more toward for benefit corporation?
Yes.
Because
So
this is something that's kind of holding on to.
yes, I would say that if your company is kind of thinking about a space where you may want to pursue foundation funding and for-profit investment, the benefit corporation is the perfect structure. And the foundation folks are familiar with it and know about it and are much more comfortable taking stock or making a grant to you if you've got that purpose kind of baked into your company.
Because we applied for a couple of foundations, and it seems to me that they weren't really familiar with it, and they keep saying that we still, our charter is not really defined yet, so we don't know how the tax benefits of it would interfere with the foundations.
Yeah,
That's the reason we've been turned down so much with so many foundations, and I thought that would be one of the benefits that we could actually use, but we don't need to law.
If they're not educated, then it's kind of an uphill battle. Like I said, like
do you know of any foundations yourself that actually granted for benefit corporations?
Yeah,
especially in the healthcare domain.
Omidyar is very familiar with this space. I don't know if they've specifically I know Omidyar Network.
Yeah.
So they're very familiar with this space. The School Foundation is also very familiar with this space. To a lesser extent, Gates Foundation. So that's just a few. I mean, it just really depends where the foundation is, like even just in the country, right? There's like hotspots here in the Twin Cities and New York are kind of like some of the places where this is happening most. And then also just like how big the foundation is, who their attorneys are, it's a lot of it is just like not being educated. And if they're not, if they're still kind of like dipping their toe into PRI or MRI, they might not be really comfortable doing this yet, but other foundations are like, oh yeah, we've been doing that for 20 years, it's fine, so sometimes, and I have to applaud Rose at Hand Up. She's got a blog post about being a benefit corporation, and I encourage all of my clients to do the same in some way, shape, or form, because you are educating the public about this when you choose to do it. So, some of it is like investor education work, and you are kind of signing up for that if you're kind of going out to the general public. You're not necessarily signing up for it if you've already identified impact investors in the space that are interested in what you're doing. So, yeah.
I have a comment just to echo that, is that we found the same thing, is that we were hoping to see more foundation and philanthropic and impact investors. We haven't very much. And we have a little bit. We got some from people.org, which is great. They're a foundation. And, I think my message to the foundation community is, we're taking this big risk to be benefit corporations, and they really need to step up too and help meet us where we are in the early stages to really make this happen. It takes a whole ecosystem to make this successful.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't foundations want to invest in B Corps?
They're, similar to a lot of industries, foundations want to do what they've been doing, and they don't necessarily have a big team, right? Regardless of how much assets under management they might have, like the team of people in the office is probably not that big, and so their familiarity with the structure is a big driver for whether or not they'll entertain the idea.
But for these foundations, are donating to the nonprofit versus the
Yes.
Do you think there's an issue with like competition metrics, because foundations are also held to their boards and endowment standards to fund the greatest impact, and if you're a B Corp that has the opportunity to make a sacrifice on impact for your side mission, or do you think that was like an added risk for them as far as doing things that they understand their service model and predictable impact?
Yeah, I think that opens up a whole conversation about how you want to define impact. So, for me, one of the reasons why I'm a proponent of this model is that I do also operate in the philanthropic world, and some things can only be solved by throwing a bunch of money at them, and you can like try to measure your impact from doing that, you know, like mosquito nets to prevent malaria, right? But there's a lot of things that actually become more sustainable if you charge people for them. And I think there's a lot of ways that we still have to figure out how to apply capitalism to some of the issues in our world. And I don't think like philanthropic dollars is the only way to go. So, you know, but you have to change the conversation. And a lot of times in the philanthropic world, like they've got one mindset about how they're going to solve the problem, right? And so you just incremental steps. But there are progressive people out there, and it's happening. So, I mean, just even people that you don't expect sometimes are like, hey, I learned about this thing, you know, like tell me more about how this works. And I'm like, it's very interesting, you know, like, so it's, you know, slowly people who might even be traditionally associated with Wall Street or, you know, kind of a traditional mindset are kind of coming around. So we just need more examples of success.